This Thursday's opening. Start to play some games, don't they? Some spring ball or no?
Pitchers, catchers are
No?
in. Cubs are projected to win it, so everything's good.
We know the projections don't matter. Giants haven't won it in a while, so they'll. This might be the year that they're back. I am ready. Yeah, go ahead with your questions. We'll get started.
Start with Valpo then.
Yeah.
Valpo look like since you played them last year?
They played. They had a really good game with Bradley in their last game, and both teams, Bradley and Valpo, both played great basketball. That was a highly competitive game. It was a physical game. Bradley put themselves in a good position. It was kind of a possession game for a lot of it until late. Then Valpo had a great finish to that game. But they've, a little bit like us, I guess, they've played really well at home. And they've had success at home. They haven't found as much success on the road, similar to our team and what we've gone through. The other thing I would tell you that looks similar watching them on film, we haven't seen them for a long time. So obviously, watching them on film is there hasn't been a game, at least of what I've seen here recently, where they look like they aren't giving their best effort. Our numbers are, our league records are exactly the same. A lot of our numbers are the same. Where we're finding success, a lot of that's the same. When I watch them play, they are playing extremely hard. They are on the same page. They're doing. They've changed some things with what they're doing. In an effort to see if they can't find some stuff that's going to work better for them. So, they've been a hard team for people to play against. Just haven't been able to find success on the road. But they've played. They've really played well at home, and obviously that's where the game is tomorrow night. So we're and they're coming off a great game. I thought they played great against Bradley. Even if you take out that, down the stretch they were terrific. But even if you take that out, just the first 35 minutes of the game was highly competitive, and they played really well.
In that first meeting, you built that big lead, and then in the second half, they just really drove it to the basket got a lot of fouls. How do you try and counter that?
Yeah, they did some of that, Garrett, but they also made some threes. They made some threes that allowed them to get back in the game, and then they started driving it. I would anticipate that would be part of it. It was, a little bit of a unique situation where we had I don't know if it was 25 or what the lead was. They had very little choice but to throw up some threes and try to get back in. And once they did, and give them credit, but once they did, they were able to find some stuff driving it and made some more plays. And we shortened our possessions as fast as quickly as we could. We kept catching it and trying to make stuff happen instead of lengthening those possessions in the last 90 seconds. So we learned a lot from that. So you give them credit for playing it all the way through and making that game close, but a little bit of a different circumstance than what usually is going to happen. And the one guy on their team, I would mention that Marcus Golden coming off the bench is playing great. And I liked him coming into our game. He didn't have big numbers coming into our game, but I really liked him. Because he rebounds the ball at both ends, and he's active. He's able to do a lot of things. They can play him at the undersized power forward spot. They can play him at the small forward spot, and he brings a lot to the table. And again, his numbers weren't what they are now. His last 5 games, he's shooting 50% from the 3-point line. His scoring average is up considerably from the first, let's say 5-6 games of league play. But I liked him a lot coming into our game because he did so many things outside of scoring the basketball and outside of making shots, and he's playing great for him, and their point guard's playing at a high level as well. So, like I said, I've been impressed because they've continued to stay together and they've continued to play really hard, and they've been very competitive in their game. So it's going to be a hard game.
I know there's not really anything you can do about it. You had your struggles on the road, and this will be the first time any of your guys have played at Valpo.
Oh,
Is there
right.
anything you can do to maybe help them a little bit?
Yeah, from that standpoint, I don't think so. I think it's. I think they're going to have to figure some things out on their own a little bit from that standpoint. And I like that coming out of our game at Illinois State. We played a pretty good game. I wasn't, as you would expect, and our guys were the same way. I wasn't real happy after the game in terms of the result. But when I went back through it, our guys, when I mentioned figuring some things out in the first half, the guys had to figure out a lot of things offensively, and they did against that zone. They did a lot of that on their own, and Clint was a big part of that. He made some shots, but he did some things against the zone on his own in terms of where he was going and what he was seeing, and that was an important part of that basketball game. And then in the second half, we had guys make some plays and get some baskets. Ty drove one off the wing and got a layup when we needed a basket. Guys moved it around, and Clint was able to seal and get a dunk when we needed a basket. We had that game too. We didn't guard them on all the threes, but they made them all in the second half. 11 of 14 is that may never happen again. You make 11 threes in a game, and that's a good number. That's better than good. You make 15 or 16, and that just doesn't happen very often. So you make 11 and a half, that may not happen again for anybody. And while they were doing that, again, we needed to defend better. But while they were doing that, we still had the game reasonable with 4 or 5 minutes left. While they're making 11 threes. So our guys figured some things out on their own, and they made some plays when they had to. And I think that's the most important thing going into tomorrow's game. More important than not having played at Valpo before. More important than a lot of things, I would tell you, is continuing to work to figure some things out. As players and as a group, if you're going to win on the road, you got a lot of responsibility, and you got to figure some things out. And we did that in a lot of ways against Illinois State. We're just going to have to do it better tomorrow. Yeah.
You mentioned trying to figure some things out. I know the second half's been kind of a struggle for this team throughout league play. Is there some factors that you can kind of figure out that have led to some of those struggles there out in the mission?
Yeah, and we've had that a lot in the second half, or on the road, in particular. It's been different things. Obviously, Illinois State, they've given them too many opportunities from the three-point line. You go back a ways to the Indiana State game. It was some scouting report mistakes, and we haven't made as many of those here lately. So that's gotten better. At Bradley, we let them get loose in transition. That's been better as well. Our last two road games, the Illinois State one I've talked about, the game at Drake, it's a 2-point game with 8 minutes left, and both teams are playing hard and playing pretty well, and we just weren't able to make enough plays down the stretch. So I think our last two road games, we've been better. It hasn't been, and Illinois State had to make a bunch of shots, to beat us at their place. The Drake one, they just, they made a couple more plays than we did, but it wasn't scouting report stuff. It wasn't transition. It wasn't some of those things that we had to get cleaned up.
Any update on Javon's status?
Yeah, he will not practice today. We're flying out mid-afternoon here, and we'll work out when we get there. But he won't practice today, so don't anticipate him dressing for tomorrow's game. And then hopefully when we get back, he's able to get back on the practice floor before Saturday.